Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 34 of Teaching Tales, the podcast totally devoted to sharing stories. I am Brent Coley, an elementary principal in Southern California, and I'm really excited because tonight I have joining me somebody who I have followed from afar, but I'm actually getting to talk to for the first time, someone who, before we started recording, I think we're, at least in my mind, kindred spirits in terms of he shares my passion for storytelling, and that is Todd Nesloney. Todd, how you doing, man?
Hey, man, I am great, and I'm so thrilled to be here and be on the show, so thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Like I said, I mean, storytelling is one of the most powerful instructional strategies I think there is. I mean, in my little thing on my website, the greatest storyteller ever to walk the earth, a man who could walk on water, frequently taught through stories. So, I mean, people remember stories. So before we jump into said stories, let anyone who is not familiar with you and your background and what you do, who is Todd Nesloney?
I guess it depends on who you ask. But since you're asking me, I am an elementary principal in Novasota, Texas, which is about an hour west of Houston, Texas. I have been a principal. This is my fourth year. Before that, I taught in the classroom in a fourth and fifth grade classroom for 7 years. I love working with kids, and I also co-wrote this little book called Kids Deserve It.
Which is a fantastic book. I was talking with one of my teachers earlier today who has also read that book, and I said, "Hey, Natalie, I'm going to get to chat with one of the authors of that tonight." She was like, "Oh my gosh!" So, and I'm going to be chatting with Adam in a couple days. So we're going to have you guys back to back. So I'm super stoked about that. So when we kind of messaged back and forth about, well, what do we want the theme for this episode to be? You said, much to my delight, how about sharing as educators, sharing our stories? So you've thought about it. So which story do you want to share? So,
well, I thought it was funny when we talked about this because, when I finished, Adam and I wrote Kids Deserve It about 2 years ago was when we actually wrote it before I went to the publisher and everything. And when the book came out and we were done with it, I was like, that's it. I will never write another book. I am done. I put everything on the page. That was exhausting. And we just celebrated the release of the book. In about, I guess October of last year, I was sitting with a group of my teachers, and they were just sharing some things they were doing in the classroom, and I was just like, man, these guys are doing some brilliant stuff in the classroom. And I thought, I'm always really big on trying to use the platform that I've been given to try to amplify the voices of others. And so I said, well, why don't I try to amplify their voice? And so I was thinking about ways that I could better the things that they were doing, or even some of the beliefs they held about kids or education. And so then I had this idea of, hey, I could probably put it in a book. And so I went to Dave and Shelley Burgess, my publisher, and I said, okay, I think I have an idea for a new book. I know I'm crazy getting right back into the swing of things. I said, but I really want to write a book that's written just like Kids Deserve It, because that was my heart on the page. And I think that's why that book is connected with so many people, is because they could tell that we were really genuine in what we were trying to share.
Mm-hmm. Totally comes through.
Really? Good.
Right. That absolutely comes. It's as if you're sitting in a coffee shop, which is probably what you were going for. So
definitely, because I just wanted to be. I love teaching through stories, just like what you were talking about earlier. So that's why we try to tell so many stories to the book. And so I said, I want to write a book like that again. I said, but I want to write it with my staff, because if I'm going to do something after Kids Deserve It, I want it to be unique. And I said, there's not a book out there where a school gets to tell their story or from the voices of all their teachers. And so I announced it to my staff and really had to pressure some people to share their story, because when you work with teachers, they hate being on camera. They feel really uncomfortable with their writing. A lot of teachers will say, my stuff's not that great. I see so-and-so sharing things on there. Theirs is so much better. And I've always been of the belief, just like Angela Myers talks about, is that, all of us bring worth. All of us have a genius. And the moment we withhold our genius from the world, we're doing a disservice to the world. And so I did a lot of talking with my teachers about sharing their story. And for a good chunk of them, I had to go and say, hey, I think this would be awesome for you to share. Or do you remember when this happened? And so I gathered their stories. I wrote every chapter, and every chapter features an insert or nurse or music leader or instructional aide or secretary. We really wanted to focus on everybody's voice, because everybody at the school matters and makes a difference. And it's been really exciting getting to kind of put that book together. And I got to read a copy of it about a month ago. And I was just like excited for this book to be out, because my teachers have been joking around. They're like, oh my gosh, are we going to be famous? And I'm like, well, people are going to know your name because you're in a book now. But just to see their excitement and the excitement on campus, because the books, there's some instructional practice ideas in there, like classroom transformation, math strategies, things like that. But there's also just some really good heartfelt stories. Maybe a story about an interaction they had with the parent or a teacher or a student, or one of my favorite chapters in the book is called "It's Okay to Grieve." And in that chapter, I talk about how important it is that when things happen in our lives, that we take the time to grieve it, that we don't just push it aside, that we don't act like it's not that big of a deal. We actually emotion and share that emotion with others. And so the story I write about in the book is I write two stories in that chapter. One of them is about, very briefly, just about losing my wife's best friend in a car wreck unexpectedly. And then the other story that I share is, in Kids Deserve It, I wrote a story about my grandma and about her passing and the impact that it has on me. And after Kids Deserve It came out, and before I wrote Stories from Webb, her husband, my grandfather, passed away. And some similar instances of dealing with that. And I wrote about just that grieving process of losing both sides of them, and what that was like. And when I shared that with my staff and asked some of them to write some things, just some of the stories that they were willing to pour out were just incredible. There's one story in there that's super powerful about one of my teachers going through a miscarriage and losing her child. And so just the vulnerability that exists within that, just to show that, yeah, we're all in this field together. We all go through, but that's where we have the opportunity to really bond together and share those stories and allow those stories to speak to each other's lives and show that we aren't alone in what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, gosh, you're making me even more excited to check this one out. So, but I think that's the great thing. It's what you're doing with your book. I mean, because the fact that it's not just you sharing your stories, which you probably have enough to write your own book. We hear that all the time. Oh, geez, you should write a book. You're actually doing it, but I love how you are bringing your staff in. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this podcast is, yeah, I have a bunch of stories and I like to share them, but it's not just me talking alone on this podcast each episode. We have so many, how many millions of educators are out there, each one with their own story. And what you just said about not feeling alone. I mean, I've got a principals meeting coming up on Wednesday. And I look forward to those. We've got them once a month. Probably you've got something similar to that at your district level. I look forward to that because one of the things is there's an informal time to sit and share stories with my colleagues. And it's that opportunity there's 11 elementary schools in my district. So to sit around a table with 10 other principals and feel like you just said, I'm not alone. So when it's that crazy, oh my gosh, my single plan for student achievement is due. This is due. This is due. This is due. Everything's going on. And to hear them say like exactly what I'm feeling is awesome. But if we don't have those conversations, if we don't tell those stories to each other, we feel isolated. We feel like, can I do this? So
Well, and I also I really firmly believe in the fact that if you've been given a platform wanting to hear your story, then you have a responsibility to amplify the voices of others as well. And I know that with me, I mean, I don't say this, oh, this is so uncomfortable to say, period, but I know that I have a fairly large following on Twitter. I know that people see my tweets, watch the podcast show, join the Kids Deserve It chat, whatever. And that's why I've been very cognizant and very conscientious about making sure, like, I don't want to host every Kids Deserve It chat. I don't want to add them to either. I want us, every educator does something phenomenal. Let's have these guest moderators. Let's share the spotlight. When we were sharing our blog often on Kids Deserve It, it was like, I don't want to write the blogs. I want to point to all these other people.
Yep.
And when Adam and I start having this conversation, it's like, and I don't want to find people that have huge followings. I want to find that teacher who's got 50 followers, but is sharing some killer stuff online. Let's advertise them and share their voices. And so when this opportunity for the book arose, I was like, this is my opportunity to take this platform that I've been given and not say, look at Todd, Todd's so amazing, but say, look at these people in the trenches doing it every day, who some of them don't have a social media account. Some of them have never written anything for somebody else to see before. But to just take them and give them that moment to say that your voice is important, hear it. And so often in education, we're so beaten down by the system that we don't feel like we have a voice. We don't feel like anybody's listening, or like I said earlier, we see a lot of really great stuff and it makes us feel like our stuff pales in comparison.
Yeah.
And so just really taking that time to know that you're in this job because you're doing something right. So let's celebrate that, and keeping that mindset too of just because it seems obvious to you, it doesn't mean it's obvious to others. And so when we don't share something because it's like, oh, well, that's nothing, everybody knows that. It's like, actually, everybody doesn't know that. So we do still, because even me traveling and speaking, even though I'm a full-time principal, I travel once a month and do a speaking engagement, and it still is surprising to me when I will say something that I have been talking about for 5 years, and people will be like, oh, that's so amazing, I've never heard that. And I'm like, what? How? Like when somebody hasn't heard of Kahoot, I'm like, how have you not heard of Kahoot? Everybody talks about Kahoot. And they're like, oh, that's so amazing. And I have to remember, everybody is in a different area and in a different path, and that's why we can't just not share something because it sounds like everybody knows it. If you're doing awesome stuff and you know that what you're doing is good, get it out there.
And not diminishing the value in your own mind of what it is, because I think so many people, and I think you and I would probably put ourselves in that. I mean, like you said, Kahoot, what you may not even think to share Kahoot because you think, well, everybody knows about that. But I love to say, I mean, when I have been able to give presentations and things like that, the power of you and I'm in California, you're in Texas. Yet right now I'm being inspired by you. I'm learning from you. I love to say that right now, someone in the world is online searching for what you, meaning whoever I'm talking to, has. 7 billion people in the world right now, there's a teacher on his or her computer searching for blank, fill in the blank. Maybe it's that classroom management strategy. Maybe it's that Kahoot. Maybe whatever it is, something that you feel is minuscule. I mean, I learned some keystroke thing the other day that was like, I had never, and I like tech, and I mean, I present at tech conferences and stuff like that, and it was a very basic thing, to your point, I had never heard of before. And the person looking at me, she looked at me like, you've never heard of this before? And it's like, no, thank you so much for sharing that. And like you said,
right,
we're sitting on that it's socially, I mean morally irresponsible to not share. If you had food and somebody next to you, and you had extra food and somebody next to you didn't have it, and you didn't share that, but it's the same type of thing. It's educational food. It's professional nourishment for those around us. People who, like I said, are actively right now looking for it.
Right, exactly.
So, no, I mean, wow, that's I'm really looking forward to reading that. And do you have any specific things that you any specific stories? I mean, don't want to give away the book, or something from Kids
Well,
Deserve It, or anything that's happened recently to you that you think somebody needs to hear, even if it's a small thing.
well, there's a story I write about in the book that is one of my favorite stories to have included. And it's about, last year every Christmas, we have had a family Christmas night at our school where families can come up. There's all these random games. There's pizza, popcorn. We show a free movie. And it's a kind of like a fundraiser for us that PTO puts on.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a student that has been a difficult student with us before, asking if he could stay. And we had said, do you have a ride? Or is your family going to come? That kind of stuff. And he was like, no. We were like, well, then you have to ride the bus home. You can't stay if you don't have a ride that's here. And so about halfway through the night, I noticed he was running around. And I was like, well, I guess he got a ride somehow. And I remember the night ended. I was turning all the lights off in the front office. And I was walking to the front office area. And on one of our couches, he was sitting there asleep. Him up, and I said, why are you here? What are you doing? Where's your ride? And he was like, oh, I stayed here after school. And I said, and how are you getting home? And he said, I don't know. And I said, then why did you stay? I wanted to spend more time with my friends. And I said, who? And he listed a couple teachers. And I said, the teachers are your friends? And he was like, yeah, I wanted to spend more time with them. And I said, well, get up. Let's go in the car. I'll take you home. Come on. His family could have cared less where he was. They weren't looking for him. He hadn't been home after school. This is 8:45 at night now.
Wow.
Nobody had any concern at all. So we got in the car. I took him home. And I remember, and he, like I said, was a difficult student that never really said anything encouraging to another adult on campus. But I remember dropping him off, and before I got out of the car, he stopped and he said, thank you for bringing me home. And it was one of those moments that I was like, this kid's never said thank you for anything. But it hit me so much just to remember that for some kids, and some can hide it really well. But just this simple act of this student wanting to stay after school for an event so he could spend more time with his teachers who he knew was going to be there. He was going to get home and falling asleep on the couch in the office. And me just giving him a ride home and hearing him say something like, thank you for Homer. And it was just, and then the next day at school, he was back to his normal ways. But it was kind of he went over the junior high this year, the other night, and he lives within walking distance now. And so he walked over and he gave me a big hug and asked me how I was doing. And I was like, oh, this is that kid that I was able to take home. And so those little moments that as educators, what we do that really makes a difference and that makes the job worth it on those days when it's just like, what am I even doing? This is the hardest job ever. I'm not cut out for this. I can't handle this. Nobody likes me. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
It was just a nice reminder of the impact that we make even when we don't realize it.
Exactly. I was just thinking of something that just happened to me the other day that ties right into what you just said. I was observing in a first grade classroom, and some of them were working independently, some were in small groups, and some of the kids were doing a little writing activity. And I walked over to a girl and I said, what are you writing about? And she looked up and she said, I'm writing about you. And I kind of was taken aback, like, really? And I said, can I see what you've written? And she said, yeah. And she had a little picture of me, which was very cute. Not that I'm cute, but she one of those characters is like, oh, I didn't know I looked like that. But it was just like, I like my principal. I think he's nice. I think he's awesome. OSUM, which was so cool. But it's one of those students, to your point of that you don't. It's a student that I've had very little interaction with. So it's one of those students that, you're writing about me? Like, we haven't had a lot of interaction. You haven't been at our school that long, but something has, I mean, whether it's the announcements in the morning, it could have been the smiles or the greetings when they get dropped off. Something has clicked with her enough that she wrote about me. And I don't say that, again, kind of like you said, oh, it makes me uncomfortable to even say that. The point is not that she was writing about me. The point was, I would never have guessed that that particular student would have written to me. Because some students, you're thinking, boy, I'm making a difference in this kid's life. Like, I'm working overtime on this, and I'm seeing like the tangible benefits. And then there's the others that they just kind of go by each day. But I think that's the moral of these two stories. The one that your kiddo who was sleeping on the couch, and the one that said she was writing about me. Ones that we wouldn't necessarily have thought we were making an impact, but we are.
Well, and it reminds me of another kid that I've been working with a lot. He's in first grade now. I had him in pre-K and kinder. And in pre-K, he was a handful, to say the least. Kindergarten picked up, and he started getting together. And this year, he just had an incredible year. And I do first grade lunch duty. And every single day, he comes up and asks me how I'm doing, asks me if I'll sit with him, even though I'm in there doing duty. And it's so funny because I'm like, dude, you hated me in pre-K. And kindergarten, we mended some fences, but now you're like my best friend. And then it was so funny because today, there was like 3 or 4 kids in lunch detention. And so I have another aide in there helping me with lunch duty. And so I was sitting with the lunch detention kids to make sure they were quiet and to kind of talk about some of the choices they had made. And he walked over with his tray and he said, "Can I sit with you?" And I said, "Do you have lunch detention?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, then don't you want to sit with your friends?" And he said, "No. Can I sit with you?" And I said, "Sure." And so he sat down and we chatted the whole lunch, and I was kind of like, oh, this is so cool that it sounds so dumb. I'm a 32-year-old man excited that this little first grader is wanting to sit with me at lunch. But it was kind of one of those, it was like, oh, look, this kid that hated me in pre-K or acted like he did and it was difficult in kindergarten. It's like now we're like buddies, and he'd rather sit with me during lunch today than sit with his friends. And so it's just like what we've been saying. It's you make an impact whether you see it or not. And I talk about, I love the analogy of a seed growing, in that, especially in elementary education. Some of us get to till the soil, some of us plant the seed, some of us water it, and some of us actually get to see it grow. A frustrating part as elementary educators is often we don't get to see the growth. We're just in the ones digging in the dirt, putting the seed down, hopefully putting some water on it and saying, I hope something comes from this. And that's hard, to constantly be tilling in the ground and not see fruits from your labor. But we keep doing it because we know that something will grow from it if we take care of it. And so it's like every kid is that seed, and we have to be putting effort into all of them. We can't let any of them slip through the cracks. And you know what? I may not be the person that reaches them at all, and that's okay. I may just be the one that puts the seed in the ground. I may not be able to put a drop of water on it, but the next person, that if we're all putting in that effort, the next person, they may be the one that reaches them to that next level. And that's why we can't stop, even for those kids that we're not sure if we're even getting through to.
Yeah. Well, and you tell that story about the pre-K and K, and now he's your best friend in first grade. Beautiful illustration that when you have to be with those kids who are challenging, and you have to ride some of those kids, it just goes to show that if you do it the right way, which you obviously have, they appreciate that. Right. And he's now your best friend. And it's kind of,
they want that structure. They want that discipline. They want to know that you care.
Yes.
Even in the moment, they may not act like it. In the end, they can sit there and go, that person really cares about me because they spent that time doing that.
Yeah. I had 2 kids one year when I taught 5th grade, and the 2 kids that required the most attention, the most reminders, that were probably the most challenging, were the only 2 students on the last day of school who gave me a hug. And it was just one of those, like, I wouldn't, if you would have said, name 2 students who are going to give you a hug that day, it would not have been, 2 students who were going to throw darts at your picture on a dartboard, it would have been those 2 because I had to be on them, because that's what they needed. But they were able to see, oh, he does this because he cares. Right. So now, wow, that's, Todd, thank you for sharing, man. That's you have just You've excited me about your stories. I can't wait to see that. Can you? I don't think you've released. You haven't have a release date, and that's okay.
Yes,
I'm not pushing it.
I announced on Friday. So the official release date is January 24th, and it'll be for pre-sale the week before. January 18th, I think, is the pre-sale date. But it will start shipping from Amazon on January 24th, and God, that feels so long away. I'm just ready for it to be out. Been working on this book for over a year, and I'm like, I just want it to be out there for the world to see.
Awesome. Well, you definitely have somebody who will be picking that up, and your other book, co-written with Adam Welcome, called Kids Deserve It, which, if anyone is listening and has not read that, another excellent, and like we have said, very an easy read in terms of it's conversational. It's just something that is easy to get through, but really, really powerful.
Right. And
anyone who, you can go to Amazon and find those. If anyone wants to connect with you online, how could they do that, Todd?
Well, I'm on every pretty much social media platform there is, and you can find all that on my website, which is just toddnesloney.com. It's got all my social media networks. It's got the books and links to them, the Kids Deserve It posters we have, the t-shirts, all that kind of stuff. Everything's on my site, my blog, all of it, how you can contact me for anything else. And if you can't find that, or you don't know how to spell Todd Nesloney, you can just start spelling it the best way you can and just Google it and it'll come up. But on Twitter and Instagram, I'm Tech Ninja Todd.
Tech Ninja Todd. Fantastic. Well, Tech Ninja Todd, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for amplifying, like you said, not just your own stories, but those around you, because we're all surrounded by people who have awesomeness in them, even if they don't realize it themselves. So I appreciate you getting that out there. I can't wait to read it myself and help make your teachers famous. So
they said they'll appreciate that.
Yeah, you tell them Brent Coley will think that that they are famous from some nobody in Southern California. So, well, Todd, thank you again for taking the time. I appreciate it. And for everyone listening, thank you for taking the time. If you have not already done so, once again, you can find us in iTunes, in Google Play. If you haven't done so, subscribe. If you like what you hear, give us a review and a like. We would appreciate that. When I say we, meaning me, really. I would appreciate that. And that just helps get the word out so more people can benefit from hearing this. It's not about me. It's about, as Todd has said, getting the word out and amplifying the awesome stories that others have. So once again, everyone, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, have a good one.